All right, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to our March Autism 200 class. Couple of just housekeeping items. Any teachers here or at any of our sites? This class is eligible for Washington State clock hours. It just needs to be combined with the April class. So you need to attend both this class and the next class in order to get credit. Okay. Any questions about that? If you're here, you can certainly talk to me outside after the lecture or speak to the site coordinator. I don't know if you noticed, there's a table with some information related to some research studies that are conducted through the University of Washington and here through Seattle Children's if you are interested. And finally, we are really happy to have Rosemary White return to our Autism 200 series after a couple of year absence. Rosemary has been an occupational therapist since 1972 and owns and operates pediatric, physical, and occupational therapy services in Seattle and is a partner in Northwest Pediatric Therapy in Portland, Oregon. Rosemary received her neurodevelopmental therapy training in London with the Bobaths, am I saying that correctly? Her sensory integrative therapy training in Los Angeles with Dr. A. Jean Ayers, and her training in DIR Floortime with the late Stanley Greenspan and Serena Wieder, PhD, and the faculty of the ICDL. In addition to her clinical work, Rosemary is very active in teaching and consulting throughout the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, and Australia. Rosemary is senior faculty in Profectum, a DIR educational organization with Dr. Serena Wieder as clinical director. She is faculty in the Interdisciplinary Council on Developmental and Learning Disabilities, the ICDL, PhD program in infant mental health and developmental disabilities, and is also adjunct clinical faculty at the University of Washington in the School of Nursing Infant Mental Health Certificate Program. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to return after a couple of years. I haven't been able to come because I've been traveling, which is something that I, as an Australian, love to do. So I've been sorry that I haven't been able to come, but I'm glad to be back again. So I want to chat with you today, and what I'd like to find out from the group here is how many people are parents of a child on the autism spectrum or challenges with relating and communicating. Okay, how many are teachers? Okay, therapists? Okay, psychologists? Okay, well, it's wonderful to be here, and my goal today is to really give you a sense of what the DIR Floortime model is and how we can embrace that model as we work with children and their families when they present with challenges in relating and communicating. So DIR, which is an acronym which I'm going to explain in a little bit, is a treatment philosophy for parents and professionals for children with challenges in relating and communicating, including autism. So it's not exclusive to just children who present with autism, but really to a wider range of individuals, because it's very much a relationship-based approach to treatment, so that we're really thinking about relating with one another. This treatment approach can be blended into everyday life as it supports a child's ability to share attention, to be engaged, and to have a back and forth interaction to support social and emotional development. Within this work, emphasis is placed on understanding the child's unique individual strengths and challenges, and to tailor interactions sensitive to the child and the caregiver. So one of the things that I think is really wonderful about this model is we're not just thinking about the child, although we really want to think about the strengths of the child and then support where the challenges are, but we're also invested in really working and supporting parents in their interactions with their children, or if a child's in the school setting, with the educators, with the whether they be the teachers or paraprofessionals. I always like to start out some presentations with these 4 quotes from a book that was written by the late Stanley Greenspan called Building Healthy Minds. How does the child develop the miraculous ability to attend, to be calm and interested in the world, to desire to interact with others, and to woo those around them to interact with them? we are social beings, and we become social beings in our interactions with others from day one. How does the child learn to read others' gestures and indicate their needs? Initially through gesture and then through the use of language. We are individuals who communicate with one another not only through words, but 93% of our communication is nonverbal. It's the gestural piece. It's the tone of our voice. It's the affect piece. And infants in the first few months of life begin to read our gestures and begin to understand the world through that, and then later through language. How does the child develop the ability to think and plan, how to interact with their world, and to solve physical problems to achieve their goals? One of the things that's so amazing about child development is that babies are really showing their intentions as they reach for your face early on in life, as they reach for a toy. And they're thinking about what they want to satiate their desires. And one of the most important things is really getting into rhythm with the child and thinking about what is their drive. And finally, how do they develop the ability to become social beings, to think, to communicate, as well as have compassion for others? And I think this is a really important quote because, I'm a mother of 4 daughters, and of course I do want them to complete school and complete college and get a job, and for still a couple of them to move out of the house. But on the other side of it, one of my and the goal of myself and my husband's is for them to really be socially successful, to be social beings, to find their core relational partners in life, and to have friendships with other people. Not only to have the friendships and understanding of being in an interaction with other people, but also to have compassion, to be able to think about another person's perspective. And what another person's experience may be, though it may be different from theirs. And these are, I think, goals that we all have for every child. So how do we develop to become that social being? The core is through relationships. The foundation for life is built on the ability to attain and sustain a co-regulated interaction. And we'll talk about that in a second. But relationships are the vehicle for creating learning interactions. If you all just think about your favorite subject that you may have had when you were in school, and think about, was it just the subject matter, or was it the relationship that you had from the teacher who you were learning that information from? And I think one of the things that's so important is it's that relationship and the intricacies of how information is shared that really sets that foundation to lead us to our passions. But that also happens in our interactions with other people and our interactions in terms of social relationships. This is a brief video from Harvard.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
I think this is a really important thing to think about, that, as a child and as we are developing, we don't develop in an isolated way. We don't develop one skill or one function in an isolated way, but it all connects together. And that's the beauty of our central nervous system. And so I think that this is important. And a lot of the latest research in terms of looking at developmental challenges is that sometimes there are some challenges in terms of the robustness of interconnectivity, but it doesn't mean that you can't support that developmental process. So when we look at DIR, it stands for a developmental approach. And one of the unique aspects of this model is it looks at the individual uniqueness of each person. So it's looking at those strengths, and it's looking and considering the challenges. And then it's a relationship-based model. So that developmental piece is called, we're really looking at what we call the functional emotional development of the child, which is the essential foundation for interacting. The individual differences are these strengths and challenges related to processing and regulation, and it's a relationship-based. And I really want to keep on emphasizing this piece, because it's through relationships that it really organizes a child's experience and supports all domains of development. So when we think about our work, the key consideration is it's not just what you're doing, but more about how you do it. So as I said, the R of DIR, relationships are the vehicle for creating learning interactions which are tailored to the child's individual processing differences, and thereby enable the child to progressively master what we term functional developmental capacities. So what I'm going to really talk about now is, what is that individual piece that we're really looking at? And we're really looking at how an individual processes sensory information and what we think of as sensory modulation, like the equalizer of sensory information coming into us and balancing it. And what I really want to highlight here is we all are experiencing sensory input to our bodies. You're hearing me. The people here in the auditorium are seeing me. The people who are watching this via satellite or video are seeing it through screens. And you're receiving visual input, auditory input. As you sit in the chairs, you're experiencing the presence of your own body in the chairs. You're also, if you're holding onto a cup and having a cup of coffee, you're getting input through your hands. And no sensory system in your body functions alone. It's like a symphony. It's like a symphony going on, and as we have a symphony, one instrument may be the leader, such as the strings, and then the percussion or the wind instruments harmonize. And that's how our sensory systems work. They don't work as one system in total isolation, but rather it's this harmonious orchestra that's occurring. And at one point, you may be cueing into auditory, and then the next moment, you're cueing into visual. But the auditory wraps itself around that to give you a comprehensive perception. So that videotape from Harvard really talks about how our systems talk to one another and give us a comprehensive perception of our experiences in the world. So when a child comes to see me and I'm looking at how are they orchestrating their sensory information, do they have this synchrony, or does one lead and are the others lagging a little bit behind? And one of the things we're going to look at is how do we tailor our interactions to help that orchestra come together. In that way, we're going to look at how a child regulates themselves within the world to maintain a calm, attentive state. Another area we're going to be looking at is postural control for function. How do I operate my body? And a lot of the latest research in autism is looking at the subtle motor challenges that individuals who present with a diagnosis of autism have. And it's when we look back retroactively, there are subtle indicators that this has been going on for a long period of time. We look at communication, and I'm not a speech and language pathologist, but I look at communication in the context of relationships. And as an occupational therapist, I'm looking at how that body piece comes in and is a vital part of communication. We're looking at spatial awareness of the self and the environment. So who am I, and how do I relate to not only my immediate self but the world? So I'm thinking about how I take in visual information, auditory, somatosensory, which is my body awareness, and spatial capacities. And one of the things is, why does this sort of is so important? Think about a caregiver, a parent, who is holding their baby, and we hold our little baby and we support their little shoulders and their head in the first few weeks of life, and we talk to them. And then as they, even within the first 2 or 3 weeks of life, dad might be talking on the other side of the room, and an infant who's being held will turn their head to find where daddy is. They have this map that they're taking in from the sounds of the world to be able to have that social connection. And we're looking at what we term praxis. How do I have ideas? How do I then plan and sequence what I'm going to do to achieve my goal, whether it be to reach for my mother's face, or whether it be to reach for a rattle, or to reach for food or a toy. And then how do I execute it, and adaptation. These are things that I'm considering that are going to be so important as I meet a family and their a parent and their child, and getting a sense of all of these components that make up who we are. So as an OT, the unique skills that I bring in as an OT in understanding the neurobiology of a child, sensory processing, postural control, visual spatial capacities and praxis and related motor planning is essential, as it informs us how to tailor our interactions and coach a parent or play partner to engage in a manner that will support a child to strengthen their developmental capacities. A child's ability to process experiences and develop postural control occurs in the flow of an affective interaction. We don't develop control in isolation. We develop it in the rhythms of an interaction with another person. And this can be with a significant caregiver or caregivers. And it sets the foundation for our physical control, our spatial awareness, communication, and praxis. So I want to talk, so we've talked about relationships, and then I've talked about this individual profile of what I'm going to be considering when I'm supporting a relationship. And then when we think about, well, where do we take all this information? And what we want to really think about is, how do we support development of a child in that relationship? And so the functional emotional developmental capacities provide a direction for supporting the emotional journey of the child in the context of a relationship. So it's not about acquisition of skills. It's really about supporting that emotional development of a child in their relationship with other people and in their interactions with the world. So things that I'm thinking about are what we term co-regulation, which supports the development of self-regulation and shared attention. And what we mean by co-regulation is that as I'm in an interaction with another person, I really start to read the other person to alter my actions in anticipation of another person. So as I'm talking with you and I'm doing 99.9% of the talking, you are still responding. I look for little nods of the head, a little smile, a little look towards me or another person, which means you're altering your actions as you read and respond to mine. If you're in a back and forth interaction with another person, just one-to-one, you can really see this happening as if one person's talking. The other person waits for breaks in this pattern of speech to be able to know, oh, I just want to put in my little 50 cents worth here. Or it may be that I'm quiet and I'm going to just assimilate the information and give some nods, or I might make a touch comment. I might do all these things. So when we relate with other people, we're constantly adjusting what we're doing to stay in the interaction. And when that happens, it really helps a person to be able to stay regulated and being there, and to be able to share attention, think about the same things. That then supports engagement. Going back to those first few slides, it's when an infant can be wooed and will woo you. How many of you have been up in an elevator with a 5-month-old? You know, you hold that 5-month-old, and what do? They scan all of the people in the elevator looking for the person who's going to respond to their big eyes so that they woo other people. And then it becomes the rhythm of a dance. We want to look at purposeful interaction and what we think of as affect to intent. You can watch a child and you can watch where their eyes go and where they're maybe moving towards, and you go, I know what they're going to do. So we just see this energy coming of children showing their intentions. And then beginning to respond to our intentions, being able to anticipate what we're going to do. So, you know, if you think about what does this mean at 7 months universally? Pick me up, right? How did a baby learn that? Did they just learn it at 7 months? Or was it where from very early on we came in and go, oh, you beautiful little baby, let me pick you up. We gesture to them and they read our cues and begin over time to anticipate and get themselves ready. So by 5 months, they're really going with you. And then by 7 months, they're saying, hey, pick me up. I want to be picked up. So this is part of this flow that occurs in development. And then a baby starts and a child starts to develop this sense of self. They start to feel powerful. I can crawl across the room. I can get to what I want. And they both feel physically and emotionally powerful. But also what happens is, if I can't quite get what I want, because I've had this earlier process of being in an interaction, being engaged and showing my intentions and reading the intentions of other people, when I can't get the thing I want, I turn to somebody else and say, help me. And the first help me is a cry. And then it's, And then it's turning to you and asking with gestures, and finally it's help me. But it's a progression that occurs out of relationships. And that allows children to stay in a long, continuous flow of interaction. And what we term behavioral organization, which is beginning to read the cues. How many of you have had a 7 or 8 month old infant who sees all the cords for your computer? And what do? They drive straight towards the computer or the plug outlets, and we go, which is the beginning of put on the brakes. And this is a huge developmental process and step which is going to set a foundation for being able to be in interactions throughout life. And then children start to move into representational play, where they start to engage in play that's beyond just physical exploration and moves into play that represents my own inner world. So this is where a child will pretend to be mother. They'll pick up their bear and they'll pet their bear. They'll feed their bear. They'll put them to bed. Then they'll become the teacher. Then they'll become the fireman. Then they'll become the policeman. And they're constantly refining their play to practice being a more mature person in life. And then they become Buzz Lightyear and Frozen and other characters that are taking on a more abstract representation of a differentiation between reality and pretend, and beginning to sort out what is real and what is not real, as we then move up into building bridges between ideas and emotional thinking. And this is where a child not only differentiates between reality and pretend, but they start to project what the outcomes of actions are and think about where things, what would have caused things, and what the motives behind actions will be. So what we're going to do now is, I want to come back. This model, which is a model, it's an interdisciplinary model. So as an OT, I bring my profession as an OT, but I'm considering relationships. I'm considering the individual child and the caregiver, and then I'm supporting this developmental process. And what it's done for me has given me a real guidance in terms of my work as a therapist with families to know how to support development in a much broader way than just motor milestones or functional skill milestones, but rather supporting a child to really be able to interact with their peers and their family and the bigger picture of society. So we're going to think about these first 3 developmental levels and talk about the individual profile and the supporting of the relationships. So as I said, that first developmental level that begins at birth, and one thing I want to really highlight here is it's not as though you master one thing and move on to the next. This is like a constantly developing process that gets richer and richer as we develop. None of us are perfect, right? So we're still often working on shared problem solving, particularly if any of you are computer illiterate and you ask a loved one to help you fix something on your computer and you ask them and then they take over. That's not shared problem solving, as much as I try to tell my husband that. But one of the things is I won't retain the skills unless there's collaboration. So one of the things we look at is we want to think about this back and forth flow of interaction. We want to think about engagement and really looking at what is the intentions of a child. What are they telling us and what is the intentions of a caregiver? So this is a lovely little girl by the name of Yuval who I met actually 3 years ago, which is amazing, when she had just turned 2. And this was my first meeting. And one of the things that this model, you know, as a professional, it's been wonderful for me because for some of you who are parents, you know, you come into a professional for an evaluation and they take your child off and they do a whole series of tests on your child and you might be sitting in the waiting room or sitting at the side. One of the gifts that this model has given to me has been that I want to be in partnership with the families. So the first time I meet a family, I'm going to sit back and watch the rhythms of their play together with symbolic toys, with sensory toys, and with movement toys. And my goal is to really look for the strengths. Where do we see these lovely back and forth opportunities of engagement? Because that's going to tell me about the child's strengths. So it's really looking at the strengths not only of the child but also of the caregivers.
A little bit. Okay, so the work that I do, I'm an occupational therapist. So what is an occupational therapist? It's like occupation, in pediatrics, occupation of a child is play. That's how we learn. You know, it's not about academics. It's not learning to read and write. It's how do we play, and through our play explore not only our physical development but then conceptualization. Like here, the toys have got holes, so she seeing does the cow fit through the hole. That's a learning process of visual spatial organization. So how do we join her in that play? And I'm looking at how does she have a sense of her own physical body, as well as how she's taking in the sights and the sounds of the world, the actions of others in relation to her. And then I'm also looking at the part about it is, you know, for movement and sensation, we have perception. And perception comes not from me just putting it together and associating vision with touch and sounds and your comments, but it's also what happens emotionally. If you have a really warm look on your face as she's playing with the baby doll, then the emotional tags that go with it, or the emotional connections that give meaning to that exploration, are positive. If she goes to the plug out and you go, then something to do with the plug outlet is scary. So even though she may not differentiate what's the difference between the plug outlet and, say, the doorstop, you're not going to have the same facial expression around the doorstop than you do have here. So it's how we read the expression of others that gives meaning to our experiences. But we have to cue into people to see those facial expressions. So I'm looking at that piece. And so one of the things that and then how do we organize our body in terms of our motor control to continue to explore.
So one of the things that I want to really bring in now is, you know, this is the beginning of meeting Yuval and her parents, but one of the things that we're thinking about in terms of what is the glue that really supports relationships. And in the center here, we have what we term sensory affective interaction. Now, if somebody had said to me, you're not allowed move your hands, and you have to speak in a monotone, then it's going to be a pretty boring an hour and a half. But one of the things is that if I feel passionate about something, I'm going to use everything I can to convey to you what is, in essence, the emotion and the meaning that I feel around something. And what happens is, as we interact with a child, our responses are the glue that pulls us together. And what happens is, as we are affective, as we use our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our body gesture, our oohs and our ahs, or ooh, then what happens is it affects the arousal, it affects attention, and it then contributes to action. So in the center here, we have this sensory affective interaction, not only of me, but also my play partner, or the parent and the play partner. And we're really looking at how do we support arousal, attention, and action. So as I said earlier, co-regulation, which is described by Alan Fogel, who's a researcher from the University of Utah, defines co-regulation as the social process by which individuals dynamically alter their actions with respect to the ongoing and anticipated actions of their partner. So an example of this is, if you've ever been to New York and walked down Fifth Avenue, you know, if you're not on the right side of the street, you're going to bump into everybody. Now, I grew up in Australia, and we walk on and we drive on the opposite side of the road. And it wasn't until I had lived here for 20 years and I went back to Australia with one of my daughters, and she says, I know why you bump into people in the United States, because I'm always walking on the wrong side and I'm not anticipating as much. Whereas all of our escalators in Australia are on the opposite side to the US and things like that. So my developmental process was to anticipate people on the opposite side of the street. But if you're in Manhattan and you're walking down Manhattan, Fifth Avenue, and you see somebody walking in the same trajectory as you, are you going to wait to bump into each other, or are you going to anticipate and shift? So you could look at that at a physical level, but we also have this in our interactions with other people, and that's what co-regulation is. And in the beginning, I might be doing 99% for that 1%, because we want to really bring in that ability to read and anticipate others. So this is just a month later with Yuval and her parents, and they're singing in Hebrew, so you'll have to bear with my singing as well too.
Wow. So sing the same song again.
וואו, כולם? רק עכשיו.
רגע, כולם עולים.
Everybody's on.
כולם עולים. יופי.
The one thing I love about this model is, as Jim mentioned, I travel and do consulting and teaching all over the world. And you don't have to speak the same language, because as we watch Yuval and her parents speaking Hebrew, we can still get all of the emotional texture of what's going on by listening to their tone of voice, by watching Yuval's gestures to know she wants to put these baby dolls on the rocker. So we can see that piece. Now, one of the things that we're thinking about is, how do we bring in that shared social referencing? So she's bathed with the beautiful voices of her parents, who are joining her as they're in the rocker. And one of the things that we think about in terms of sharing attention is, we look at what the child's interested in, and we say, we're going to wrap your experience with the emotional texture of that sensory affective interaction. So we're joining her, we're singing. I say, you want to put the baby dolls on top of the rocker.
מוכנים?
Nahanen. Oh, yeah. Oh, everybody in. Now let her. We want her. She's showing you her ideas with her hands. We want her to be able to do it slow enough so she's referencing you, like, "Hey, you get my idea," because it's happening very quickly.
Yeah.
And so she's not quite connecting it with you as much as I'd like. But the other part about it is that she's coming up with all these incredible ideas.
וואו, עוד תינוקות.
So Imelda, who's gonna get on?
מי יעלה? מי יעלה על הנדנדה?
מי יעלה על הנדנדה, יובל?
מי
את מי
יעלה?
נשים? מי נשים על הנדנדה?
הצידה.
Yeah, move them away, move them. Space.
נכון, צריך מקום. מי יעלה על הנדנדה?
So we take every gesture and acknowledge it positively, rather than trying to say, "Oh, don't you want to put them back on here and do it again?" We want to look at what her intent is. Oh, sit up, baby.
שב תינוק, שב. יופי. יושב יפה.
And what that does is build flexibility. When we acknowledge it positively, it builds flexibility. If we acknowledge it like, "Oh, you don't want that," then it builds a little bit more limited repertoire.
And what I love about this last little piece is you can see her getting this little smile on her face of like, oh, you're with me. You all get my idea. And I think one of the things that's so exciting when we start to look at how we can read the child's ideas, they start to feel that sense of power. You understand what I'm trying to do? Rather than trying to have a child follow our agenda, we want to find out what their agenda is. Okay, so this is in June, so I met Yuval in March, and in June, one of the challenges was that when Mom and Dad would go to the park, she would run off, okay? And so now we're thinking about how do we help Yuval to be able to feel like, okay, I'm going to run off a little bit, but then I want to come back to Mommy and Daddy. So we're at their house, and Daisy. So this is lovely. Do you see how she's sort of going away and then turning around?
Hi.
That's what it's all about. That babies start to reference across space. So they go up.
בואי חזרה. בואי חזרה. איזה יופי חזרה.
That's exactly. So one of the things is now, I think this is really quite symbolic because she walks to the edge of the grass and then Mom is wooing her back. And there's things that are really important here that it's like Mom and Dad are down there with their arms open. Instead of saying, stop, no further, what they're saying is, we want you to come back. And so it's the reunion back with Mom and Dad that make this far more rewarding emotionally than running off. And this is how we're really thinking about this. It's in terms of, we played games here where she would walk down the side of the little hillside, and then Mom and Dad would call her to come back again with their arms open, and she'd come back with these beautiful big smiles on her face. So one of the things that we often see in terms of children who have challenges, and when we think about the development of our social sense, our social brain, like that video that was shown from Harvard, and we think about what happens in development with any child, the infant begins to demonstrate the capacity for sharing attention that then leads to joint attention in the first year of life. Now, I don't know if many of you are parents, either here or watching, but if you've ever watched a parent with a 1, 2, or 3-day-old baby or a 2-week-old baby, the babies are looking up at the lights, they're looking at the pictures on the wall, they're looking at things a little bit in the distance. And what we do is, if you listen to parents talk, they will say, oh, it's a lovely light, it's twinkly. Or, oh, that's the picture of Mummy and Daddy when they got married. We look at where an infant's eyes are going, this really young baby, and we bathe their attention with the rhythms of our voice. And it's with that the caregiver is really sharing attention with the infant's focus of attention. And then the infant begins to tune in and hear where the parent is, see where the parent is. So that's sort of happening in these first few weeks of life. So initially the caregiver shares attention with the infant's focus of attention. The infant attunes to the caregiver's voice, their facial expression, a touch around their focus of attention. The infant begins to respond to the caregiver with a look, a vocalization, which would be like a coo, and then a movement. But what starts to happen then is, as the infant starts to take in the sights and the sounds and the action of you as you're joining them, the infant begins to anticipate the attention and the action of the caregiver. The infant begins to then predict the attention and the action of the caregiver. And then we see shared social referencing, a look to the caregiver, with the gaze to the caregiver that conveys that we're in an interaction together. So why I wanted to outline this is people talk about eye contact. What is eye contact? I mean, do we look at each other and stare at one another? What we have is flexible shifts of shared social referencing. When somebody says something in the conversation that really pulls my attention in, or I begin to listen to what they're saying and then I anticipate and predict what they're going to do, then I have referencing. Today I was working with a little eight-month-old baby, and he was holding on to a little plastic toy and he was banging it. So then I just tapped my hand on the ground beside him in the rhythm that he was doing. So I'm sharing attention around what his focus is. And then I would stop, and then he would tap, and then I would tap. And when he started to anticipate that I was going to tap, he then looked up at me. He looked at my hand, and then he looked at me. That's what occurs in the typical flow of development, and it's the same with every child who presents with challenges. We've got to think about what are the components that really support this development, and it comes out of the rhythms of a co-regulated interaction where I'm coaching the parent to alter their actions in anticipation of their child. So over the first few months of life, the infant has been bathed in the rhythm of shared attention of the caregiver. We're following what, if the baby's chewing on their fingers, we go yum, 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 yum. We do this all the time, and that sets the foundation for social interaction. Joint attention emerges as the infant intentionally woos the caregiver to join him in his focus of attention. So this is where the infant now woos others with an alternating gaze. I've got the apple, I look at you, I look back at the apple and say, this is fabulous. I want you to be as interested in what I'm playing with as I am. And so we see that alternating gaze is present when the infant and child engage in attending, then gazes at the parent to see if they are sharing the same focus of attention. That's what it's about. It's all about, are you interested in what I'm interested in? At this stage in development, the infant is focused on themselves. They think they're the best in the world, right? What I'm interested in, I want you to be interested in. And I just want to parallel this. If I have a client who's interested in letters, I'm not going to hide the letters. I'm going to be as interested in them so that we can have the rhythm of the interaction. And over time, it becomes broader and broader because the relationship is the vehicle. The infant later will point to indicate to the parent his focus of attention. And this was shown in Geraldine Dawson's research when she looked at children with a diagnosis of autism and children who did not have a diagnosis of autism and looked at their first birthday party. One of the differences was that the children with autism were not doing a point. It didn't mean that they couldn't point their finger, but they didn't yet have the capacities to reach out in terms of being able to say, pay attention. But what they did do is they referenced their parents a lot so that there was components of, I want to share what I'm doing. It's just that I can't do that more refined piece yet. And the other challenge that they presented was that they didn't attune to their name as rapidly. Now, that's not because they didn't want to, but it can be hypothesized that I couldn't work out where you were spatially when you said my name, because that asked me to coordinate my head and neck to find you in the GPS system of auditory space. So what happens in joint attention, which we've seen for children who have a diagnosis of autism, there are hallmarks that say there are delays in this development. And one of the things that I'm looking at from an OT perspective is what is it in the underlying neurobiology that's not bringing about that connectivity. And then I'm going to tailor what I'm doing to give the child the time, and then you see the joint attention. So it may be I slow my voice down. I might go, ooh, it's wait for the child to find me and then see what it is. So there's all of this wonderful opportunities when we think about tailoring interactions that support a child to really show their abilities. But when the world's going too fast, which is what I said when the dolls were falling off that rocker, that we had to slow down, and then Yuval was able to join us. Later, the infant and child follows the parent's gaze, point, and then verbal comments to share attention around the parent's focus of attention. So what happens over development? We have self-monitoring. Once you can look back and forth, you have your own perception of an object and representation of yourself. That's proximal sensory awareness, knowing me. Then other monitoring, which is awareness of the other person looking at the object and representing that. So it's now thinking about me and thinking about you. And for the social rhythms, we have to integrate and put both of those things together. And what is central to DIR Floortime in terms of supporting relationships is affect. Affect is central to all learning. Affective reciprocity allows children to find meaning and symbolize experiences. So affect comes from a variety of avenues from each and every individual. It's the tone of your voice, the gestures that you use, the facial expression you use, the rhythm and pacing of your voice and actions. It's a sigh or a slump in your posture that conveys that you're feeling emotionally, whether it be relief or frustration. The physical action, a jump, a gleeful cheer, or a squeal that conveys that you're feeling, what you're feeling, joy, excitement, surprise. And you can jump and have a squeal, but based on taking in the context, you're going to know whether it's joyful or fearful. And this is really important because it provides meaning to experiences. Affect conveys the intent to interact with another person and the desire to sustain relationships. Natural affect that is connected to the relationship is powerful. So when you have natural affect that really joins where your partner is, it has powerful meaning in terms of gluing things together. Affect enables one to connect thoughts and ideas and to share them with others. Affect enables one to convey to others how their actions impact the individual. And affect enables one to reflect on actions, not only your own, but that of others. I love this one, that it enables one to convey to others how their actions impact the individual. There was a book written that was an English literature writer who wrote a book, How Mothers Talk to Their Daughters. So it's like, oh, you're wearing that, are you? Nice haircut. So that even though the words say one thing, the affect conveys something different. So again, I come back to, as an OT, I'm thinking about the neurobiology, the postural control, the sensory processing, but I'm thinking about it not in isolation. I'm thinking about it how, when I understand the child and the caregiver, which is going to take time, and we're going to have to form a relationship, and I'm going to think about how to support and tailor interactions that are unique to each child and family with whom I work. But that's what makes it great fun, because it's really wonderful to be able to think about how we can support this developmental process. So this is a little girl, Katie, and her mom. And Katie came to see me when she was with her mom when she was 19 months old. And she was delayed in her language. She was would fall apart very easily, have temper tantrums, would then bang her head on the floor and squeal. And it was really hard for Mum. And Mum had a daughter who was 6 years old, so she had parented another child. But when I watched this is the first time I'm meeting them, and as I watch Mom, the first question I ask, is Mom available to play with Katie? She definitely wants to play with Katie, but Katie can't really pick up and anticipate what Mom's doing.
Katie. Hello. 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 Fun stuff, huh? I'm gonna go to come in the beach. What is that?
Kitty.
Oh, you put that one on. You can do it too.
Hello, kitty.
I'm going to eat some beans. Eat your hand. Eat your hand.
I'm just going to move this on a little tiny bit. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is Mom is really wanting to play with Katie, as we all would as parents. And Mom comes up with ideas. And Katie is focused down on her beans or whatever. And so when Mom brings in the toy, it surprises Katie. It's like, where did that come from? And she pushes it away. And when I watch this, I feel so much for Mom, that we have this desire, but things are happening too quickly for Katie. And so she says, too much. And this is a perfect example right here.
How pretty.
It went on Katie's head, too much. Now Katie sees it for herself and puts it on herself. So when she can do it, she can anticipate and predict what's going to happen. When somebody does it to her, it's like a surprise, because I have to respond to what's coming from the external world. But what I want you to watch now is look at the plume of the hat. When that plume passed Katie's eyes, she was able to follow it, and she found Mummy.
It's pretty, huh?
And so then we see the interaction. So one of the things I'm looking at is, what is the styles of play that are going to help Katie and Mum get that co-regulation and predict and anticipate and predict one another. So now we're going to think about, and why I've had these in red is, as we move up to think about a child developing a sense of themselves, both physically and emotionally, shared social problem solving with the ability to stay in a long flow of interaction, and behavioural organisation, I'm still thinking about all the earlier developmental levels too. It's not that you master one, but you're always saying, okay, we're up here, but do we have that shared attention? Do we have that engagement? And this is a couple of months, she's 3 months later.
Keep building on that.
Okay. Right here? No. Oh, okay. I don't do that. This? Or this? No.
So you get two little ones there.
This?
Oops, did I just go? I must have gone over that. Let me just...
Okay, I'll do these ones.
That's it, just keep it going. This is a long conversation.
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, let's get you right.
So with this, I'm really this is a long gestural vocal conversation between Katie and her mum. And there are little things like Katie and mum are both together at eye level. rather than Mum being sitting up and picking up things and putting them in there. They're both together. Katie's sitting in, those balls from McDonald's. So she feels, she gets a sense of where her body is so she can put her energy towards engaging with Mummy, okay? And then all I'm saying is just take it as a long conversation. And Mum does such a lovely job of, ooh. She's not saying, put the balls here and do this, watch me, I'm doing that. She's staying right at the developmental level where Katie feels like, Mummy and I are having an interaction back and forth together. And what happens as they play together is then Katie gets them stuck. You didn't want that. Uh-oh.
Hey!
And each time you bring in a new idea, do it slow enough so she has time to get what your idea is.
Out! Come out! Ah, you got it!
That's great, that's great. So that's shared problem solving. Mum's saying, get out, get out. And, if you didn't know that Katie, I had shown you the previous videotape, and you were looking at a 22-month-old, they play these games all the time. They stuff things up their shirt. They play, it's the beginning of hide and seek, where I'm hiding things inside my shirt, and the baby's looking for it. And one of the things is what you're supporting Katie and Mommy to be able to do is read one another's cues, to be able to anticipate one another and alter their actions with one another. And Katie is forming this sequence in the relationship with Mum of what to do first, second, and third. And one of the things that I love, you don't see me. I'm sitting in the background because it's the relationship with Mummy or Daddy and the child and not me, other than you heard me singing in the earlier one. But one of the things that this model has given me as a therapist is instead of me getting all the warm fuzzies in the interaction with the child, it's the parent and the child who are experiencing it. And that is really wonderful. And 90% of the time I'm lying on the floor. So, okay, so this is Katie a month later with Mum. And now she's playing in some shaving cream. And a lot of people think OTs work with children who have tactile sensitivities or are tactily defensive. That word is a really incorrect word, because what it's saying is the Mack truck of the touch is not being connected with the other sensory systems, the other members of the orchestra, to give meaning to this. So instead of trying to desensitize, which I don't think is a particularly accurate term, what we want to do is use our affective interaction to give meaning to the sensory experiences. So, and Katie wants to strip off all of her clothes all the time and stuff. And yeah, it is. And actually there's a wonderful research article by Alyssa Marcos, who's a neurologist from University of San Francisco, and I'm actually lecturing with her on Saturday. But she's really looked at the neurobiology of sensory processing disorders and looking at the white matter, that insulation around the nerves. And you could say that one sensory system gets ahead of the others. It's like the passengers coming out of a plane and they're all carrying baggage, and some get ahead and they all arrived at the same time, but some got ahead and the others lagged behind. But what we want to do is get all the passengers, this is weird, I'm doing a tangential thing, into the train at SeaTac, and all be back in the same carriage together to get into the terminal. One of the things we want to do is really try and help through our interaction to give meaning to those sensory experiences. And so here we're playing with the shaving cream, but it's not about dealing with sensitivity. Stop. This is actually looking a lot on her tactile sensitivity. I want to just say, she said, "Adieu." Her uncle had had a birthday the weekend before, and they'd had a birthday cake. And she saw this, and it actually represented a birthday cake. But I had to watch the video to know this too, so. Now I'm following her lead.
Here. Ugh, yeah, let's get wipe it off. Wipe that puppy off. Ready?
Now, why I put this in is if I'd been focused on we've got to get her to touch this stuff, because that's what my goal is, to touch messy stuff, I would not be following what is this developmental process of helping her feel power.
Oh, it's so good. You just checking everybody as we get into rhythm with her.
So now, do you remember in October how she was focused down and Mum put the hat on and she was pushing things away? Again, we're a little bit lower than her and we're following her. And what you see then is this beautiful shared social referencing. Hey, like, hey, you're following exactly my pattern. And that's what helps her feel, or gives her that sense of physical and emotional power. Now watch this.
Yeah, that was great.
She just blew out the candles of the cake. So she's actually up in representational play, but we're really working on that shared attention, engagement, really looking at what her intentions and ideas are and helping her feel, wow, this is great. So when we think about the social brain, as social development continues, facial expression, tone of voice, and body language are all important social cues that the child must learn in order to navigate the environments in their life. Home, grandparents, neighbors, daycare, school, playground. And one thing that I really want to highlight too is if you think about a 2-year-old who's at home and they're chatty Cathy and they're doing absolutely everything, and then you go to the neighbor's house and they're white on rice with you. They're clinging to you. And it takes them a while. It's sort of like you get more comfortable in your nuclear family and then it gets easier and easier, but when you're in your nuclear family and comfort, when you get to the extended family or social neighborhoods, etc., you're not as competent. So that happens to all of us, and we need to think about that for children. So again, I want to bring back to thinking about this sensory affective interaction at the core that supports arousal, attention, and action. And when we think about that sensory affective regulation, perception, cognition, the interconnectivity, going back to that first video from Harvard, the interconnectivity of the visual, the auditory, and somatosensory, that's your body map, touch and muscle and joint information, those somatosensory aspects of a sensory experience in concert with the affective supports, with affect supports meaningful and comprehensive perceptions. So my perceptions of events are unique to me. Your perceptions of events are unique to you based on your own experiences. And what we really want to do in our work is support meaningful perceptions for children. The interconnectivity of sensory systems sets the foundation for active participation in a back and forth flow of social interaction. And comprehensive perceptions set the foundation for cognitive development. So as we learn and stay in interactions and develop perceptions, we're setting the foundation for learning. And there's a journal called the Journal of Play, and there's a wonderful article that was just published last week on play and self-regulation. And there's also the American Academy of Pediatrics just put out an article this week on the importance of play for regulation and parent-child relationships. So more and more is coming in terms of we learn through play. It's the occupation of a child. So
Can you go back?
Yep.
What does it mean, comprehensive perceptions?
So understanding the more comprehensive perception. So instead of having like a unique perception of the isolated event, you're taking in what may be going on around that too. So I'll give you an example would be that as I start to connect things together, so it wouldn't be like I see a cup and I see it's round, but I might see steam coming off of it as well too. And I might see a Starbucks sign on it, so now I know it's a hot cup of coffee from Starbucks, etc. So it's getting, you're bringing more and more in together to be able, yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to set the foundation for cognitive development of my students, but from that sentence, I don't know how to do it.
Then one of the things that, what I would think about doing is, you know, say you're doing, they may see the cup, and it may lead to a thought about, oh, Starbucks. Then what you can do is like, ooh, put your hand across it. Whew. So you're bringing in more information about that piece. So it might be like at our office, we do a lot where we might be in one treatment room and another child may come to the door and knock on the door to get a toy out. And we won't just open the door, we'll go, oh, must be someone at the door. Is it a big person or a small person? And we'll say that loud enough so the therapist on the other side will knock again and we'll cue into where it is. So we're getting comprehensive perception about this person must be short because the sound of the knock was down here as opposed to up here. So you're getting more and more information, and that's telling you about shape and space and size, which are going to be the foundations later on for, you know, more specific learning such as math. So, you know, there's a lot we learn about how do I fit underneath the couch? You know, how do my ball went under the couch. Can I get underneath it? You know, is it big enough to fit my body through? There's so much that goes on early on that sets the foundation for later development. So that's what we're talking about.
So we want to add aspects or facets to every point.
Exactly. But not doing it in an unnatural way. You know, doing it in a way, and you're looking for the gleam in the child's eye that goes, oh, I understand what he's telling us, you know? So when we look at those sensory systems, these are all of our sensory systems. We've got our visual, our olfactory, auditory, vestibular, proprioceptive, tactile, gustatory, smell, interoceptors, what we feel inside our body. And they all feed into the limbic system, which is our emotional system. And that sensory affective modulation, the balance, reflects the interconnectivity. I always do a little test here. Okay, well, not at this point, but just sometimes. I'm going to say a word. Frog. Tell me what you thought of. Jump, ribbit, green, princess. Okay, so all I said was a frequency of sounds. And you took in that frequency of sounds, and that at an electrophysiological level caused the neurons in your organ of Corti, which is part of your ear, to fire based on the rhythmicity of the frequencies of sound. That sent electrophysiology into your brainstem, and then that got connected with your body and your vision system before you're even consciously aware of it. Goes up to the temporal lobe, which is your auditory cortex, and then you have links to your sensory association area, vision, your body representation in the cortex, and your limbic system. So here we have a princess over here who's got emotional memories immediately connected with that, whereas we have the jumpers, we have the green people, we often have people who say slime and whatever. But so within a millisecond, you're showing interconnectivity. That's what's so amazing to me about this, that, you know, and it's all going on that gives us the perceptions of our world. And my unique memories about frog come from where I grew up in Australia, where we had little tadpoles in a stream. So I'm going down memory lane now. Now I'm up in Darwin, where frogs would jump out of the toilets. I mean, you just see how your brain keeps working and connecting things, but nobody else would have that experience, because you had your own unique experiences to frogs. And that's what we're supporting here. So no sensory system functions alone, but sensory input occurs simultaneously. Sensory systems communicate and contribute to perceptions. Sensations are connected in meaningful ways in concert with the emotional texture and the affective tone that occurs with the experience. And the outcome is unique to each individual's experience and neurobiological profile. So if you leave with anything tonight, I want you to think that no sensory system functions alone. So the question to ask oneself when assessing and thinking about your child or your students is, as part of the flow of interaction, do we have synchrony? And if we don't, we're going to support that synchrony by thinking about sensory systems and how you're going to bring in everything. When there's synchrony, we can hypothesize that one system may be the leader and the others have harmony in the relationship to the leader. This leads to the connectivity and what we call dual coding. So sensory experiences with that affective cues really allow the individual to have their own experience. And this creates individual perceptions of that sensory, affective, emotional texture. Okay, I'm going through, we're thinking about the postural control and the sensory pieces that I talked about before. And I want to just move through this because I want to, and these are references for you, because I really want to move on to look at what do we look at when we look at the whole picture. And we're thinking about moving into co-regulation, engagement, supporting interactions, that sense of self, shared problem solving, representational play, and then building bridges between ideas. And this is again for you just to have a look at, but it's putting everything together, that in the middle is the child and the caregiver. And we're thinking about the intentions to act, how things get connected, how we plan and sequence, the action that we have, and then the feedback we get from our body, and how we're all of this is going on for us to function. So this is Yuval this summer. So this is like 2.5 years into therapy. And one of the things that this model is also really wonderful about is your clients come to see me with their parents, but they also may be in preschool, and we have children who are in the preschool. Yuval has a Floortime player who supports her in her interactions with her peers at school. She's also come to our summer camps, which are DIR Floortime summer camps, and a lot of the clients that we have are getting support outside of the individual therapy session in the environments where they are interacting with peers or at home. So this is just a really sweet video clip of Yuval, who was working the children at preschool. The 3 to 4 year old children are trading and really looking at, we want sharing, right? So Yuval is thinking about, we're trying to see whether she will trade any toys between Dad, myself, and Zoe, who is her Floortime player.
Oh. And what about Zoe's octopus? With the 8 tentacles.
I want him with no trading.
What?
I want him with no trading.
No trading?
No trading.
But you gave Abba a bear.
So even when she says, I want it with no trading, do you see like, ooh, it's probably inherited from my mother, but it's like, oh, you're really trying to push the limit here?
And earlier you gave me a 3-headed dragon for the seals. It's only fair to trade, right, Abba? Mm-hmm. Zoe? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want this octopus?
Yeah.
I would take the humpback whale.
No.
She loves sea creatures, dinosaurs, and the number 4. They're her passions at the moment. Okay, so that's why I have all
You
these
have
creatures in
Orca.
here.
You don't know what I'll give you. I'll give you my backpack.
You are a good trader. Here we go.
Octopus.
You gave me your backpack with Skippy John Jones?
Yeah.
Wow. And he
Okay, so one of the things that that Yuval what I have learned is that she's at that stage still where she needs the visual prompts, like in the room. But we've really, when the family went to Israel this winter, I had a colleague of mine who speaks Hebrew, who's a speech and language pathologist, who's a DIR therapist, evaluate, because I kept on sometimes finding when I was working with her that I would push too high in terms of the language piece, and then she would get dysregulated. So really trying to understand the difference between her English and her Hebrew, and being able to really support that. And so it's been lovely for me to collaborate with the speech and language pathologist and learn that. This morning I just saw Yuval, and she was destroying a dragon, taking out his tongue, etc., and then throwing his skin on the floor. So she's really developing this power around her imaginative play. And what's exciting is she did not speak English she wasn't talking, or she was talking just under her breath occasionally when we first met her. I want to talk a little bit about this part of the emotional brain, because a lot of the children who I work with get easily overwhelmed. They get upset by things, and we sort of may see this particularly around frustrations. Katie not being able to know whether what was going to happen next, or a toy might be moved and she didn't expect it, or Yuval around negative experiences. She would often burst into tears. And Joseph Ledoux is a researcher who really talks about the low road, where there's when information comes in that's got an emotional loading to it, and it goes to our sensory thalamus. In the low road, we have sensory with emotional stimulus. It goes directly to your limbic system. This is when you sort of fly off the handle, right? And emotional responses is to that single sensory experiences. But when you have the high road, what happens is with emotional, it passes through that sensory cortices, and interconnectivity between the cortices supports a more comprehensive perception. So one of the things that we're really supporting children is to really be able to, when I do get overwhelmed, instead of distracting and saying, oh, but do this, what we want to really do is hold them emotionally and help them see the bigger picture. One thing that people often ask are their boundaries. Yes, with the balance that you cannot, with what you can do, with what you can't do. Sorry, what you can't do with what you can do. So this is a little boy. I seem to have a lot of videos of other people in other languages. This is a mom whose little boy was adopted from Russia at 12 months. Mom is Italian and they live in England. So this is sort of a mix of English and Italian. And this little guy, who's 19 months old now, wants to climb up on the counters to get to the television. How many of you have all experienced something like this, where it's the big no-no, okay? So, whoops. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, the media's not found. Okay, we can't do that. Okay. This is a little child. What happens is he climbs up and mom says, get down, get down, get down. And one of the things that I just suggest to mom is her being able to say, I love it when you jump on the couches. We can't climb on the bookshelves, but I love it when you climb on the couches. And he immediately gets down and has this beautiful jumping interaction with her, so that the relationship with her outweighed that interaction. This is from a colleague of mine, Ricky Robinson, who wrote a wonderful book called Autism Solutions. And one of the things we look at, anxiety is often prevalent for children with who have a diagnosis of autism. And often it's because I can't work out what's happening. And the behaviors that may present could be bolting, aggression, self-absorption, repetition, or tantrums. One of the things we want to look at is those behaviors and say, is that really giving us an idea that this child is feeling anxious? And then we want to look at is what's contributing to that anxiety. And so this is the I of DIR. Instead of getting stuck on the behavior, you say, are there sensory processing challenges? Is there poor comprehension of the situation? Poor motor planning, being able to work out what do I do with my body? And what are the environmental influences? So my message here is, again, when you see a behavior of a child, think about a behavior is communicative. Like every one of us, when we have a behavioral expression, we're communicating. And what we want to do is look at what are the factors that are contributing to that. And so that's where I come in and think about what could be the factors that are contributing to this. I want to just briefly show you this. This is Katie, that little girl you saw earlier. And she's looking out the window and telling me about things outside the window. This is a session with her grandmother.
Where? They're beautiful. Do you like them?
Yeah.
What do you like about butterflies?
Because I like them on my finger.
Oh, you do? Do you like when they flap?
Yeah.
Yeah? What about Nana? Do you like them? I don't know if I like them on my finger.
I like them on my finger.
You like them on your finger? I don't like them on my finger. Okay.
Yellow.
No way. Yellow again? It's a yellow day.
Ooh, sorry. Okay, so she went over to and said, this is yellow. And she picked up a balloon right here. And in the balloon is rice. So her anticipation was a balloon that would go up in the air, and it had a sound in it. So there was a conflict. And she...
It's a yellow day. Did it make a sound?
It scared me.
I'm so interested to find out what it is.
Don't pick it up.
Should the skunk or the white catch it? No?
Don't even touch it. I will throw it.
So we're not going to watch all of this, but I just want you can imagine how paralyzed she feels when she expected one thing, and how many of us would try and say, "Oh, it's just a balloon with rice in it. Look, let me shake it and show you." And she's going to get more and more of an increased heart rate and turning away. So what I do is I just sit down. And I let her tell me, hold her emotionally in that moment, and let her tell me what it feels like. And I say, I could put it up if you like, but not fast. I just stay very slow so that I help her with that. And Grandma does the same thing. And eventually she says, just leave it where it is. Don't even look at it. Don't touch it. I want to play with the dollhouse. So we end up bringing in a dollhouse. And as we're playing with this dollhouse, I'm thinking about how can we bring about resolution of this fear? Because I want to go back to that feeling of power. So I start to say, oh, I love this house. I wonder if it's near a zoo. So this would be like subtly orchestrating things. I think I've seen some zoo animals here. So I go out in my office and I bring back a skunk and an elephant. A plastic, one of those elephants from Toys R Us. And we're playing over here, and then we move over around bringing our elephant and the skunk, which I tell her, skunks, when they're a little surprised, because that's what she's feeling. I'm not going to say you're scared and it's really devastating. I'm going to say it's surprising. That was surprising, because that's what it was. When skunks get surprised, and then I'm holding the puppet, flick up their tail, and guess what they do? They squirt. And so I'm just helping her see how other people overcome their fear. So what happens is we go over to the dollhouse.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay, I better make my cue.
this is not working either. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you the story. These are frozen. We're over there, we have the dollhouse. It's one of those little Fisher-Price dollhouses, and it has a bathroom in it. So she ends up taking the elephant and putting the elephant's, I didn't do any of this, she puts the elephant's trunk in the toilet, And then she turns to the balloon and squirts the toilet water at the balloon and says, "We have power over you, balloon. My elephant squirted you." So you can imagine how powerful she feels. And she was perfectly fine then to leave the balloon, and at her birthday party a week later, she was able to celebrate with helium balloons because she'd had power over that fearful thing. Now, I don't know whether this one's good. I want to finish with this video clip of Damien, a little boy, who, again, another fearful thing. And why I'm showing this is floor time is not just playing with toys that are, Fisher-Price things, but it's really thinking about that emotional journey of the child and giving the child a sense of who they are. And let me see if this one works. Yep.
What do you think he's thinking about, Dan?
I don't know. He wants to dial a number.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe he can't remember it.
So this was at Damien's stage where he loves telephones, he likes how things work, and he wants to use my phone.
I can't. Hey, dial it for real.
Oh, I don't think so. Who would you dial?
B6 and baby by 3.
And what would happen?
I'll leave a message or not.
Okay, you dial it. You dial it and let's see what's going to happen.
For real?
I think you can do it. What are you thinking about, Dan?
Is this the one? Damien? And Rosemary.
So at this point, he's talking on my phone, and I have answered the telephone in the other room. He thinks he's talking to my secretary, but it's me.
Mary's office? In your office? and Rosemary, I'm going to put you on speaker.
Am I on speakerphone?
Yes, you are.
Do you think Rosemary is going to be mad or happy that you're in her office?
What do you think, Damien?
Oh, darn it. Sorry.
Were you worried?
No.
What are you doing in my office?
Oh, I'm going to call the police station and tell them about police office. Tell them about criminals, okay?
So I had asked him, "Do you think I'll be happy or mad?" And he could not answer that question. It was too complex a question. So then he went on a little bit of tangent that he would call the police officers. But the reason he said that is the night before, people had broken into my office and stolen my computer. So there was a link to that in terms of things that had happened. But it seems really tangential, but it was actually linked to what he was thinking about.
Where is the criminal? Oh,
Who's that?
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
Oh, what's she saying?
Now, one of the things I want to highlight here is that here's this nebulous voice coming. All of you knew what it was, right? That it's just a recorded message, and he hears it but can't connect it, and puts his hands on his ears. And I want to really highlight, a lot of children put their hands on their ears because they're confused. It could be something happened too fast, too unpredictable. It's not a direct correlation to the sound being too uncomfortable for me. So you might see hands going on ears when somebody runs down the hallway. The orchestra is not synchronous. So my message here is think about what's going on and what his experience is.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again.
I wonder what button we should press to tell her we're done. Which one did you turn on that made it speak loud?
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again.
Which one did you press that made her speak? Ah, if you'd like to make a call, please hang up and dial again. Well, that was a little surprising.
So look how many of us would want to fix it straight away? But again, this is where our affect says, we're just going to stay here. If you want to dial again, please hang up, whatever, I don't even remember. And it took him that amount of time, but he was the one who had the resolution of it. But now I want to make it positive.
I think
You solved it.
Oh, I just hung up.
Yeah, and the voice is gone now.
you know what I think. I think they didn't know you were done with the call.
Oh, is that what you think?
Maybe.
Do you think it was a real person?
No.
Do you think it was a... What do you think it was? What do
What
you
I-
think it was?
What I loved, I don't know whether you saw Dad's hand come and just gently rub his back and just say, I'm with you. So it's all the subtleties that are really important here that help Damien stay there and deal with this very overwhelming experience.
Dan?
I think it was.
This is such a perfect example. It's like, where's that coming from?
Yeah.
He can't work it out. And so then we can reframe his, like he was like, whoa, that emotional texture of like, oh, I think it was a recording. I think that was, do you know what I think it was?
See Dad's hand again, just soothing him.
And it comes on, guess when? When I forget to do that. After the speakerphone's on.
You okay?
Whew, it was surprising, wasn't it? Did you expect it?
Are your eyes getting a little itchy?
No.
Yeah, what are you thinking?
I'm getting called for 6 and 5, 8, 5.
Again? She won't come on yet.
So what he did then is I dialed my own cell phone for him at this point. And he's rubbing his eyes because it's allergy season.
Hello? Hello?
Hello,
Hello, is there... Who's in my office?
Damien.
What are you doing? Are you looking at me? Talking to me?
Is that Officer Rosemary?
Yours?
Do you want to hang up now?
No, I want to talk on speakerphone.
Okay.
Hello? Ooh, look at echoes. Ooh. Oh, Rose, this is weird.
Okay, bye.
You sound like aliens.
Bye.
So, how do you turn it off?
Okay. Oh, how do you turn it off?
What do you think?
What do you think you have to do? Yeah. And...
You figured it out.
Hello, who hung up on me? Who hung up? That was so much fun. You made me laugh. Okay, you know what? I'm looking at the...
So this is funny. This was recorded on a day where I had to leave straight away to come and present here. So one of the things that I think is really important is, let me just go back, with this is that you can take any everyday experience. And when you use the tenets of this model, where we're really thinking about relationships being in the forefront, you're tailoring your interactions to the individual child and the caregiver, and we're thinking about those developmental levels. One of the things is we see that we can really support children to move through a wide range of experiences. And what I think is really wonderful for Damien and with Katie, that other child, the other little girl you saw, is that Damien, every time he would come for the next couple of weeks, he'd be dashing off to play with my telephone because he really wanted to bring about this understanding and resolve around it too. But I made it playful at the end so it had positive emotional tags for him and he felt power through it. Okay, so in the warmth of a relationship, you will have a frown or an uh-oh. When he persists, you can pair, this is around things that you can and can't do. And when a child persists around something where you want some boundaries, one of the things that you want to really think about is what a child can do. So even if it's around fearful things, we really supported Damien to be able to do things that he could do to bring about resolution. When there are things that you want to put boundaries on, you can do things like, you can do da-da-da, and I love it when you do da-da-da. And then that gives the child really a warm feeling that you feel with your affect. And that's that facial expression or a warm smile or a vocalization or a loving touch, which dad does to really help him. And so what happens is he feels those warm fuzzies around negative things. The child will begin to stop because they want to be in the relationship. Around fearful things, it helps them come back to a calm state. So one of the things is that the functional emotional levels do build on one another. Children vary in their capacities across levels and developmental domains. And in Floortime, we move up and down that ladder based on the child's state at the moment. So we're always working and thinking about, in this playful interaction, how we're supporting the child to promote regulation and engagement and aim for synchronization. Okay. We'll finish up with this one, which is from our summer camps. And this is, again, DIR Floortime in the natural environment in the woods at a school where we had... And these boys are buying rope, which is in the form of leaves.
A piece of dirt. Mikhail, yours is worth...
Mine is worth what?
Yours is worth a t-shirt.
And this little boy loves numbers, so we're really tapping into his joy of numbers.
Whoa, look at these ones. What do you think they should be worth?
$100. $100?
$100! Oh my goodness. That's a lot. This is worth...
What?
Whoa, whoa. Oh, this and this. Oh, Josh, look. I think this one might be worth a whole rope of grass. Oh my goodness. I think I saw that rope of grass earlier.
What's a rope of grass is? Oh,
Well, a braided rope of grass. Wait, let me make one for you.
So as the little boy in orange, Mikhail, walks off, then Zoe really uses her voice, her facial expressions, her action to bring the boys together around sharing attention around a common focus of interest, which happens to be leaves that turns into braid of grass, and that it's worth $100, which falls into what Mikhail's interest is, and for the other little boy, it's clarifying ideas. This is Katie finishing off, who's now almost 5 years at this time. And why we're finishing off with this one, you saw her in the beginning where Mum was putting the hat on her. And now here, it's almost a reverse in terms of Katie's telling her or helping her mum learn how to fly.
Ooh, you got watch me. Okay, it's my turn. I'm gonna try it. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Ooh, ooh, oh. Uh-oh. You're gonna have to teach me fly. Just do what?
Climb on my back. And I will hold on to you.
Okay. And we're gonna fly?
Yeah.
Oh, 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 oh.
Now let go.
Whoa. I did it.
Daddy,
Help me.
I just teach you. Now you have to practice yourself.
Okay, let me try.
So I just taught you, now you have to practice yourself. And I think what's so lovely about this, it's a real symbolic representation of what parents do for their children when they have challenges. And that Katie's mom and every parent is there to really support their child. And what we're here for as your therapists, and particularly those who embrace the DIR model, we want to support the relationships so that the family can really flourish together. And every child's going to have their own destiny, but we're here really to support those relationships and above all to have fun in the interactions with your child. So I apologize for going over 10 minutes, but thank you all very much. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer any of them. And I also would just really like to thank all the families that I work with and their willingness to share videos. Obviously, I've sort of tried to give you an overview of the breadth of this model, but I do encourage you to go online to perfectum.org, as we have a ton of lectures that are $15 to watch for a series of lectures and they're available for 6 months. And there's also a free lecture online by Serena Wieder, which is a 2-hour free lecture on the model coming from the lens of the psychologist. And I really encourage you to seek out these resources, because it's a wonderful model and one that I think really can be embraced by every person, from every profession and for every family. Thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know everybody's got to go to bed, though.